Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the opportunity to work on what I call a hybrid or an oddball type of a reel. This is the Penn Passion 5000. If it looks similar to a lot of the other Penn reels, well it is. And well, essentially it's a fashion statement. So passion and fashion, right? You have a pink rubber gripped handle, or they call it pink, it might be magenta. Same thing on the case, just a little bit different, right, than the Penn Fierce, but internally this reel is very much a Penn Fierce reel. Well, we're going to take this reel apart. We're going to show you how it's made. We'll show you how to service this one, and we'll keep this one going for those that have a passion for fishing. I think this is kind of a marketing gimmick. When you look at the pieces and parts that go on underneath in this reel, they're essentially the same pieces and parts that are used in the Pursuit and the Fierce lines. And well, I guess that's economical. And you know what? If you only need to worry about the color of the spool, I'm sure that the Fierce spool is interchangeable. And if somehow you break a handle, well, I'm sure you can replace that with a Fierce handle as well. We're going to take the pieces and parts off. We're going to start by removing the exterior parts. This one has some braid on it, and I always recommend when you're servicing a reel to change out your line, whether it's braid or monofilament or whatever it is you happen to be using. And I always think that an annual service is a good idea, and changing the line out at that time will prevent you from having break-offs and well, maybe losing a fish of a lifetime. So I recommend that. What I also recommend is that you subscribe to my channel if you like the art of fishing reel service and repair, if you like to see how things are done. And well, this channel covers an awful lot of reels and all types and uses. Things like freshwater bait casters or saltwater trolling reels, and this one's a nice saltwater surf reel. It can also be used in lakes, from pier, from boat, and the like. Just good reels all around. Here's one of the differences that Penn added a little bit later on in the Fierce line. They added the burring that was only found on the battle pieces prior to that generation, or the latest generation. We're going to remove this handle by turning it in a clockwise manner. Whatever side this is mounted to, you always want to turn it away from the direction that you are cranking. So in the left-handed mount, you're going to be cranking forward, so you want to turn it to reverse to remove that screw and handle. We'll next take off the bump guard. This one's just in for general service, and well, hopefully it's just a matter of cleaning up some dirt and debris. But when you do your reel services, you want to do a couple of things. The first thing you want to do, of course, is to inspect all the pieces and parts. You want to make sure that those pieces and parts are not damaged or worn. And well, if they are, you're going to have to replace them if you want your reel to run good again. Well, what gets worn? Well, traditionally, the disposables or the consumables in fishing reels are the drag washers and bearings. Those are the ones you need to pay the most attention to. And you generally will get erosion or wear on your teeth from the continuous interlacing of those gears, but those, well, that's kind of expected. You'll get a little bit of a louder noise when they start to wear terribly, and then you'll get a grind if they start to get out of position or they're not meshing properly. But for general service, if your reel has been working fine, you're not hearing all those noises, you don't have to concern yourself as much beyond the drag washers and the oils, the lubrications, and we'll see what's going on in this one. So there's 3 screws here that are holding on the case after you remove that bump guard. Each screw has a little bit of a plastic washer on there. They're clear, so you may not see them in the video. When I took those off, I laid them on my table to make sure that they were all the same size. They are, so when I go to reinstall, they can go in any one of those side place holes. And now we want to remove this case. case simply lifts off. And, well, this is kind of interesting. I'm seeing the blue grease in here, which Penn uses the original blue grease. I'm also seeing some dirt in here. I'm not sure if this one got serviced or not earlier, but we'll do the full service anyway. I'm kind of thinking it did, because Penn generally does not put grease onto the face of the main gear. All right, to continue with this, we want to remove our axle shaft. That's held in place by 2 screws on a crosswind block. Interestingly enough, I just completed a diagnostic, a why did reels fail on a Penn Battle 4000. And the Penn Battle 4000 only had one screw holding on the crosswind block, and that crosswind block shattered. I'm still not quite sure why that shattered, but it did. When I remove those 2, same thing, I want to check, make sure that they're the same. And then I put my pieces and parts into a parts tray so that I know where it is when I go to reinstall. Hold your crosswind block now and remove the axle shaft by pulling up and out. And it's always a good thing just to wipe it down right away. That way you're not in any worry about going to reinstall, having your hands in a lot of different positions and realizing you didn't do that. We're going to remove our bearing next. That's a sealed bearing. So that's a change with the latest models on the Fierce and on the Battles. They've gone to the sealed bearing versus the shielded bearing. Sealed bearings don't require lubrication. Sealed means that they're kind of sealing that in for you. Just picked out that crosswind block. It's a pretty big block, and you can see that there is some dirt and debris on here. And again, I don't know if that was a different type of a grease that may have been applied along the way, or if it's just some dirt that got into the case. These are not sealed cases. Things can get in here, water and the like. And, well, you want to do your best to get that old grease and debris out of there so that when it's time to reassemble, it's a nice, clean, fresh set of lubrication that you have on there. Notice on your main gear that there is a shim washer on the post here that sits between the bearing and that main gear. I'm going to remove the main gear now. Simply pull that out. First thing I'm going to do is just clean off the grease there. That's not doing anybody any good anywhere. Now we're going to turn it over and we're going to inspect it. So now I see that we have a different grease here. So there was a service at some point here that did add grease, because again, Penn would use the original blue grease with that. This is a different one, and that's good. So the reel has been in for service. If I didn't mention before, the reel was introduced in 2018. So hopefully, if this is an older version of the reel, well, then it has been serviced, and we can see the evidence of the servicing there. Well, we just cleaned out the old grease in the cavity. That winds up in there from centrifugal force. The spinning of it will take the grease that's in the teeth and spin it out. That's where it lands. We want to check all of our teeth now to make sure that they're all neat, that they're not distorted. Check them both ways. Check the peaks on the teeth here. Check the lines there. Make sure they're uniform. Do the same thing on the back. Check the back end of this drive. That drive pushes the oscillation gear, and that oscillation gear makes the reel go up and down. All right, that's cleaned. Next up is to remove the oscillation gear. Sometimes, like the Battle that I just did, there's some reels that hold it in with the screw. Some are simply just kind of snapped on that plastic stud. So we want to do the same here. Let's remove the oscillation gear, check all of the teeth, make sure that they're free of dirt and debris and that they're clean. And well, we can go up top now before we clean out the case. I'm going to remove some of the grease there. There's a tie-down screw here that holds that's the retention clip for our rotor nut. And again, I put that into the parts tray so I don't lose it. And I'm going to lift up that clip. And that clip will go into my parts tray as well. And now we have a rotor nut here. That comes off in a counterclockwise manner. And underneath that, pay attention, you have a little ferrule here It's a plastic ferrule that sits inside your pinion gear and kind of is a cushion to the axle shaft that's going up and down. Remove your rotor, and this rotor's got some sand in it, so I'm going to turn my video off for a moment. I'm going to go over to a tap. I'm going to flush that out with water, and we'll be right back. Did I mention sand? Look at that. I wonder where this wheel was dropped. Well, I would say it's time for a cleanup, huh? All right, well, we're going to turn it off again, and we will get that sand out of there as well. Well, that took longer than I thought, but in video time, well, no time at all, right? All right, this is a backup now. This is the secondary anti-reverse. There's ridges in the back end of this rotor, and when you are spinning, it holds it in. When you go to back it off, it will trip out. That's how that will work as a secondary anti-reverse. You want to remove this. This is two pieces. There's a arm for the anti-reverse trip, and this one has a little 90-degree spring on it. And what you are best doing is loading this in from the back side. Wrong side. And mounting the spring in like that before you go and put that away. You are going to notice that there are two little ridges here, and that 90-degree spring goes between the two. That's the best way to mount that spring in there before you reinstall. All right, we've done a few things here. Let's take our penetrating oil, get the seams of the bail arms and that line roller, and then just work it back and forth to make sure that that stays nice and clean. There's still some water left over from that flushing that I did there. And let's get back, take the last piece out now. That is this assembly that includes your pinion gear, your anti-reverse clutch, and a few bearings. There's a collar that holds it on. Notice that this collar looks different on that one side, so that when you go to reinstall, that little wavy section there needs to be facing that anti-reverse dog. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel, now would be a good time to kind of jump to the comment section and leave those questions in there. And I do try to answer them. You might have a question on a different reel. You can leave that in this section as well. I do try to answer all my questions in the morning before I kind of open up the shop. So if you leave something in the evening, you'll probably see a response, well, before too long in the morning. Okay, taking our top collar, the 3 screws, I'm going to leave them right there. This should pull out, and this will give us a look at what we have here. So we have a collar with a bearing inside of it that's sealed. The bottom side of that collar has an indent. That's because the inner sleeve for the anti-reverse clutch is not flush to that clutch. There's a space here. So you need to note that the underside has the gap that you will install. Next off, we'll take that anti-reverse bearing, clutch sleeve, and a sealed bearing below. Well, sealed bearings you don't need to do anything with. You can't penetrate them with oil. So just wipe them clean, particularly as we saw here, where we had some water, sand, and everything else bouncing about there. Do the same thing with this gear that we did with the main gear. Come on, I'm going to use a brush here to pull the old greases out. Wipe it down. Inspect the teeth, uniform, clean, straight, nothing unusual. And then we can go ahead and start the reassembly of this. As soon as I find my brush. Brush in hand, let's use fishing reel grease to restore the reel. We're going to use Penn Precision reel grease, not because it's a Penn reel necessarily, but because it's a fishing reel grease. Don't go using non-fishing reel greases. They just don't have the same characteristics as a marine grease for fishing reels. And, well, why risk it? The greases and oils are pretty inexpensive. There's no reason to go use something else. The inside of this clutch is a Teflon with roller bearings. You don't oil or grease this clutch. It's a friction-driven device. All you simply do is make sure that it's clean. This one was clean. And reinstall. Same thing here. We said the bottom gap here is the side that goes down. Then you can load in your top bearing. Again, sealed, so you don't have to do anything there. And we can just go ahead and put this back in the case. With that in, we said to take the wavy side of this. That's going to face your anti-reverse dog. We'll line up those holes. And we'll play around with small screws that don't play around well with me. So if you're feeling the need to go find a beverage of your choice, this will take a minute or so. And come on back afterwards. Okay, so what have we found out so far? We found out, well, the reel's been maintained. Not sure when it's been maintained. We know that there's an issue here with a lot of sand. So we're going to say this one's a saltwater use and probably beach, doing some surf fishing and that. It's a good reel for that. But one of the things we should learn is that, well, you need to rinse these reels out after every use. Flood it with fresh water. That's the best way to get the salt and residues and the micro sands and the like off. And by all means, if you know that you've dropped the reel into the ocean, or you've dropped it on the beach, maybe you had it in a sand spike and got a good hit on by a fish, and pulled it out of that sand spike and into the sand, don't continue to use that reel. Stop, make sure that it's been cleaned and flushed before you go any further. We had mentioned that there is a little ferrule that goes into the center of that. Let's go do that. I showed you how to set this secondary arm up. Secondary arm goes between those two slots. There's that 90-degree angle. And then it sits tight and flush. Turn that over. This piece here, the groove, goes to the stud on this. Just like that, and you're set. Next up then, what we want to do is take our rotor and put that back on. We've cleaned the base of the rotor. We just need to align the rotor with the flat sides. This may be interfering. I don't think so. It may be. I'm going to pull that ferrule out again. See if that makes it easier to do. Okay. Now we can put the ferrule back in. Next up, we want to take our rotor nut. There's two sides on that rotor nut. One has got a cavity and one's a flatter side. The one with the cavity goes down low. Tighten that up. This is a good place to spin it, to give it a whirl, make sure everything's working right. And we can take the tie down or hold fast, put that on. And there's a small screw here that holds that together. That's your top end assembly service. Let's go to the bottom. We want to clean the case. So what I'm going to do here is use the penetrating oil to break off the old grease that might be hanging around. Make sure you get it all out of there. Greases tend to hold dirt, and dirt tends to become abrasive if left unchecked. So get that out of there when you're doing your service. Okay, case is clean. Next up, what we'd like to do then is take the oscillation gear. We've checked to make sure it's clean and that all the teeth are good. Oscillation gears get grease on the back, in the shaft, on the teeth, and on the front. It touches everything. It's kind of a central cog. When you put your oscillation gear in, make sure that the point is set on the lower end of the case. With that done, we can do the same thing to our crosswind block. Get some grease in the channel and on the back face. The rest of it does not need grease as it doesn't touch anything. And make sure that this is installed where the slot in the oscillation block or crosswind block is on the stud of the oscillation gear. If it isn't, well, there's going to be a big problem. I just went through a battle where that problem caused the block to break. Okay, do the same thing here. We've cleaned the main gear. We want to get the grease onto the teeth on the front, teeth on the back, which are driving the oscillation gear, shaft that goes through the bearing on the back case, and a little bit on the shaft in the front case. You want to put your main gear in before you put your axle shaft in, because you won't be able to mount the axle shaft before if you don't have that axle in place ahead of time. All right. Axle shaft goes through all the way down, merges into the crosswind block. Make sure that the two holes align, and then into your parts tray or the two screws. I don't know what I would do without a parts tray. There's other methods to manage your pieces and parts. Mine is organized chaos. I put them in different corners of the parts tray, but I do know I put everything in the parts tray for the most part. Yeah, I know somebody's out there looking at it and saying, wait a minute, your spool and your side plate aren't in the parts tray. Well, that's big enough that I'm not going to lose it. But overall, I like to make sure. All right, we can make sure right now. We can turn this thing, make sure everything's working. That's how the inner part of this reel works. Seems like it's running nice and smooth. We have the shim washer on the main gear. That gets back now with the bearing, and the side plate gets locked in. And the three side plate screws we already noted have plastic washers on them, and they're all the same size, so these can go in any one of the positions. I'm going to start with the one on the bottom, and we'll come back and do the other two. These have a screw on them that can be a Phillips head screw, or it can be a flat blade, your preference. Generally, I find myself using both. I use the flat blade to break them if it's over tightened, and then I use the Phillips head because it's more convenient for me in terms of driving it down. This is the second of the three side plate screws. I'm pretty much getting close to getting this done. Third one, make sure those little waterproof washers are on there. So essentially this reel is a Penn Fierce 3, I'm thinking. And most of the parts should be interchangeable with it. I did a quick look at the schematic and the parts breakdown, and they seem pretty much the same. But if, again, the only thing I believe is very different is if you're trying to color match on the handle, then you will have a different part number for that. The rest of it I didn't see any difference. And Penn went to their parts trays for the Fierce and Pursuit. They used all kinds. They used some pieces that go back to the Conflict, some pieces that go to the Saugus, some that go to the Battles, and so on. Okay, This one's pretty much done on the base side of this. All we want to do is service the drag washers now. So let's do that and then we'll give it a final test. To access your drag washers, remove that adjuster. Then you have a triangular clip in here. It's a spring. Please be careful as you go to remove it. And then we have a series of HT100s in here. Now these are the modern setups on the Penn Spin fishing reels, in that they use the HT100 washers as the eared washers. That's different from some of the earlier versions of the Penn reels. Check to make sure that you have a nice crisp ridge and cross hatching on them. If you do, then the washers are in good condition. You have the option to mount these either with a lubrication, where you can run them dry. I'm going to put these in dry. The three of the metal washers should be the same, because again, these would be your eared washers, so you're not looking for a different metal washer in the stack. Clean them off. Insert. Last of the drag washers goes up top. Last of the metal washers goes on. Then find the groove for your spring. Reload that in. Make sure it's in that groove all the way around. This is a retention spring, so it doesn't serve any purpose other than keeping that drag stack there, so that if you go to remove a spool, the drags don't fall out. Well, I would be surprised if I didn't find any sand inside this spool. Let's just knock that out. When you're working on sand, you saw me, I went away from the table. I went over to a basin and used water to flush it. Don't try to remove sand on your bench, because, well, it's got a good likelihood that it's going to transfer to your next project. So even if it's just a little series of grains, get it off the bench when you do that. Okay, we're tightening down the spool, making sure that it's nice and tight, and holding. It is. And back your drag off. You don't need to compress those. Let's give it a final test then. Well, it's running a whole lot smoother than it was, and it's doing it without the sand. Let's make sure it casts nicely. Right on the high spot, of course. There we go. All right, so that's it. That's your Penn Passion 5000, which was introduced in 2018, and I believe it continues to be available today, and it's not much different than the Penn Fierce 3. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. To our first responders, our first aid, police, fire, rescue, and all of the folks that work every day to keep us safe, thank you. And thank you to all for watching. Thank you to those that have subscribed, and I want to encourage those of you that have not subscribed, once again, to subscribe and to use that notification button to see when we're posting our videos. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, wishing everybody a great day.